Well, hello, friends, and welcome to Boston.com's Cocktail Club. I'm Jackson Cannon, and in a moment, I'll be joined by John Mayer Spressert, spirit specialist for Burke Distributing. It's Cinco de Mayo, so tonight we're making drinks with Mexican spirits, catching up on the local bar and restaurant scene, and of course, sharing some tips that pros use to make great drinks at home. First, I'm going to go through everything we need for tonight's session, and all the while, of course, we're taking your questions from the chat. First up in the drinks department, we're going to be making the Silver Monk. This is based on the flavor profiles of Blanco tequila, mixing with yellow chartreuse, lime juice, some sugar for body in the form of simple syrup, and then cucumber, mint. And I'm actually going to say it's not on there, but you know me, I like to have a little salt around. On this one, we can discuss the relative merits of a pinch of salt. I think it's going to push all those flavors around together and be really quite lovely. The second drink that we're going to make with John leading is the Oaxacan Old Fashioned. And this blends tequila with mezcal in a setup with agave nectar against Angostura bitters. And the preferred garnish for that is a twist of orange. For gear, of course, we're going to need to shake that Silver Monk and probably do a little muddling. If you don't have a shaker, deli quart container or a mason jar with a tight lid can work. If you don't have a muddler, I'm going to take you through how you can prepare the cucumbers so that you got a chance of knocking all those flavors out of it just by the shaking. But I'm going to try to muddle that. And then for that, you're going to want to be straining in a Hawthorne strainer through a fine mesh strainer so that we don't get any of those little bits of the mint and the cucumber spilling through into the cocktail. For the old fashioned, love to stir that in a mixing glass and pour that over a glass filled with fresh ice at the time. If you don't have that, we will talk you through how you can make that right in your old fashioned rocks glass. Of course, I've got another strainer to pour through out of the mixing glass, cutting board knife, a peeler so that we can both make that old fashioned garnish and do cucumber peels if we don't have a muddler. Always like to keep, a little bowl and plate and tweezers and stuff around just in case. For glassware, traditionally that Silver Monk goes in a coupe glass. It's a big drink. It'd be going right to the edge of that glass. And as much as I love to drink it out of that, I'd have to take the first couple of sips to be confident, like that bird that you used to get at the Spencer gift shop that slowly wets its beak. So I brought myself a big white wine glass. Wanted to show you that that's a great way to enjoy a cocktail like this as well. And then, of course, for that old fashioned, you use a nice sturdy double rocks, double old fashioned glass for that. One of the questions from early on the registration in the chat was from David. He asks, can we share our favorite Paloma recipe? David, we did a really fun little piece about the apocryphal backstory of the Paloma. In it, there is a solid recipe that you can trust. So follow the link from the chat to that article on Boston.com, and you'll see that recipe in the bottom there. Okay, that's pretty much it. We're using regular cubed ice from the freezer and can't really think too much more that we have to go through. In his 20 years in the hospitality scene, John Mayer Spressert has been behind the stick at many seminal Boston bars, including Craigie on Main, Local 149, where he was the beverage director, Citizen Public House, and Capo. Among the area bartenders, he earned a reputation for excellence and for being a relentless devotee of all things agave. Healthy parts adept bar nerd, convivial host, and tireless showman, John became a must-see if you wanted to learn more about Mexican spirits as you drank and enjoyed them with friends. In his current role as spirit specialist for Burke Distributing, John maintains a professional focus on agave education, providing legions of Boston bartenders and consumers with in-depth tequila and mezcal training. And in lieu of Venmo tips tonight, he encourages you to support the Emma Fund, bringing much needed reproductive health care to communities of need in Eastern Massachusetts. We thank him for that. You can find him on Insta at John Mayer Spressert, and you can find him here on Cocktail Club, his first appearance. John, welcome.
Hi, y'all. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. Looking forward to making drinks with you. And just tell me what's new, what's happening out there.
Oh, I mean, tequila's on fire. I tell you, I've been a tequila fan for my entire more than adult drinking life. And I never thought that I would see the day when you could walk into a bar and look at a cocktail menu and find out that the tequila cocktail on that menu is more popular than the vodka cocktail in so many places now. It's absolutely wild. It's great. It's risen a lot of boats, making some of the better tequilas a little harder to find, but certainly a good problem to have.
It's interesting. I was at Daiquiris and Daisies, a rum bar that's opened in over there on High Street, right? And a fella kind of, not for nothing, kind of bro-ishly dressed, like saunters up behind me and goes, 2 repos and soda. I was like, whoa, he's not even ordering tequila by brand. He's ordering it by age statement. And to me, and it didn't, and it showed no signs of being like a particular expert, knew what he wanted, knew how to get it. I'm curious, maybe as a context for a weigh-in, have you been seeing this, like the consumer embracing the category outside of how it's being delivered in cocktails? And can you take us through what that means in terms of Blanco and Repo and Añejo?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we have seen, particularly in the last 2 to 3 years, is just a meteoric rise in demand for the spirit. And what has been interesting for me to watch over the last 2 years, and I'm sure some of this is pandemic related, is to see folks going out and finding the resources to the really cool stuff, right? Like any category, there are going to be leaders in the category, big dogs, big, huge names, which are of varying flavor and quality. But we're in an era now where there are enough tequila nerds on the internet like me who get their voices heard that people go and ask about what's going on. So that's how some of these really cool brands are now finding themselves like, oh, it's really hard for us to keep up.
Now that's a real flip from dawn of the recent cocktail revival to end of the current time in the cocktail revival. That piece, the internet's ability to chronicle a lot of information, and you can quickly find it. It didn't exist when we were first starting to do that, and now it's like you don't even. We used to call each other on the phone and be like, do you know how to make something that now you just Google it and there it is. So, in terms of that, are there, and let's get into it. I know we're going to talk a bit about it as we make the drink, but before we do even, let's get into a little bit of what are those flavor components to tequilas? How do people make decisions who maybe aren't as expert as you? And what are some resources they can use to kind of further their learning of what they like in that regard?
Certainly. So I think let's talk a little bit about flavors and styles, just to touch on them briefly. Tequila as a beverage comes from one very specific place and one very specific plant. It comes from the state of Jalisco in Mexico, in which there is a town called Tequila, where the way that they were making their agave spirit or their mezcal sort of became the way of the land, and tequila was born. So very much in the same way that you might have a favorite type of wine, for example, like maybe you really like Napa Valley Cabernet, or maybe you really have come to love red Burgundy, which is always going to be one grape Pinot Noir. That's what tequila is. One plant, the agave plant. There's some super mature agaves behind me here, and from one very specific place. Now, that is presented in a few ways, kind of at bold face value. You mentioned Blanco, Reposado, and Añejo. Those all have to do with how much time, if any, that spirit has spent in an oak barrel. So, we think about all of the brown spirits in the world being aged in oak for the most part. Tequila, those ages are fairly young because this plant, the agave, already has taken at least 7 years to get from planting all the way to production of beverage. So that time is really spent aging in the ground rather than in the barrel. But a Blanco tequila, which I know both of us are going to use for the Silver Monk, generally sees no time in oak barrel and should only really taste like the agave plant. A Reposado will have spent at least 2 months in an oak barrel and will start to take on a little bit of flavors from that barrel, or maybe anything that was aged in the barrel before, like a bourbon. And then an añejo tequila has spent at least 1 year aging in that oak barrel. It's not a whole lot compared to like Scotch or cognac, where you see, or you would like to see these days, 10, 15, 20 years. But that raw agriculture, the agave plant really doesn't need time resting to be delicious right out the gate, like maybe a white whiskey otherwise would, if that makes sense.
Good to know. And yeah, and it's in a climate too where the some of the things that are happening are accelerated a little bit
barrel, yeah.
as well. Yeah. Well, let's get a drink in our hand, right? So I'm going to take us through the Silver Monk, and one of the first things I want to just show folks who don't have a muddler handy. Oh, even before that, one of the things I want to answer a question from the chat. Hey, can you substitute chartreuse in this drink? It's getting hard to find. That is a fact. There really is no substitute for chartreuse, but I have some kind of good news for you. This drink it's on such solid architecture. It works without chartreuse. And the agave just does a little bit more play with the lime, and it's a little bit of a simpler drink. It isn't quite as complex, obviously, but it'll work out just great if you follow all the rest of the things and just kind of leave that out. So, for a couple of slices, which a lot of times the choice that we make on this move is like, if you're making a few slices that you might garnish on a glass like that, right? Or that you might throw into the top of a Pim's cup. Those are the kind of slices that might be on a usual bar mise en place and be very easy for you to muddle into this drink. That's what I'm going to do. If you have your peeler handy, there's a fancy version of a garnish, and this drink doesn't need it, but it can have it, where you strip off the top of the peel. And if you do this a few more times, you're getting down into the meat of the cucumber. And if you're doing it, you'll feel you're releasing the water off of this, the cucumber water is coming off this, your hands are getting wet. If you throw a few of these in your shaker, you can kind of get away if you don't have that muddler without muddling the cucumber. So that's all I have to say about that, as we say. I'm going to throw a couple of pieces right in here with, I'm going to throw like 4 or 5 mint leaves. If you get a little bit of stem from the mint, that's no big deal. There's lots of beautiful oil in the stem. And we're going to be filtering that all out. And then I'm going to do a pinch of salt. And then just to give me something to muddle into, I'm going to put one of my ingredients in here just so I don't just kind of pulverize mine and have them slipping around. Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't notice that I hadn't mentioned we'll need jiggers for this gig. First time for everything. So I'm going to do 3/4 of the ounce of my simple syrup in here, and then I'm going to muddle. And you see John was doing a little crushing ahead of time. That's all good too. And just enough to break up those pieces because I didn't do the ribbons. Press the mint a little bit. You don't need to go crazy with that. And now I'm going to keep going with a full ounce of lime juice in this. This drink is an interesting build. The 3/4 chartreuse, 3/4 simple syrup kind of require a touch more lime juice. There are a few other good recipes like that in tequila, right? Like a Tommy's Margarita or something like that, where we know we use a whole ounce of lime juice and a little something less in the sweetening department. And I'm going to do a full 3/4. If it's your first time with chartreuse and you want to do half an ounce, that is okay too. I just realized we're doing 2 Phil Ward cocktails tonight.
Love it.
I'll have to send him a thank you.
I mean, what he was doing at Maya Huel was one of the most inspirational projects that someone could have done for me personally.
Like an original evangelist of this, like understanding the brands very well. And oh, here we go. Can I sub green chartreuse for yellow? I'm here to say yes, you can. Maybe roll back a little bit. It's similar in some ways, but it's very intense. Has a lot more sugar, has a lot more alcohol, has a lot more ingredients. So I would definitely not do more than half an ounce of that as a sub for the 3/4 of yellow. And then let's get to the main ingredient here. I'm using the El Tesoro Blanco. John, what do you got in your hand? For Fortaleza.
I have Fortaleza, one of my first loves. This is a Fortaleza Blanco tequila, but this is their still strength Blanco tequila. The difference between this and their regular tequila being their strength. Just about every tequila on the market is bottled at 80 proof at 40% by volume, but none of them come off the still that way. They all come off the still, between 92 and maybe as high as 110. And then you simply add water to bring it down to 80. But this expression is literally Fortaleza just as it comes off the still. If you go down and visit the distillery, which you can, they'll give you a little pull right off the still, and this is just what it tastes like. So to your point about chartreuse, though, if you're using green, it's really, really strong. It's gonna pack more of an alcohol punch. Might want to scale it back. If you're gonna use a still strength or an overproof Blanco, you might think about going down to 1.5 ounces rather than 2.
Yeah, the effect in the shaker. If you go down to 1.5, your higher alcohol content is going to rip a little more water right out of your ice there on that very first few seconds that they're in contact. So, you have some leeway there. It's the kind of the sweet and the sour ratios that you really always want to hold as intact as you can. Are we ready to shake it like we got it, like we mean it? Got some ice right here.
Is it old hat to everybody that we're adding our ice last? Is that like world shaking to any of our viewers, do you think?
Yeah, no, I think most of our regulars know at this point that we always do that to try and kind of preserve the integrity of the mix in case we get called away on some other kind of business. So shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, smells like a party. Yeah, this is such a vibrant, exciting drink. Even in a white wine glass with a wide mouth, I'm getting the signs of life out of it. Those bubbles that Embry would say should still be laughing at you while you drink your sour. Yeah, you've got a steadier hand than me if you're going to have no problem lifting that coupe, my friend.
We'll find out.
All right, cheers.
Cheers, salud. Yeah.
I mean, it really is like, it's a South Side with tequila and chartreuse, and a perfect balance. Now, I really like the lean, clean, clear, sort of lime salt vibe that the Blanco brings to this. What would be some missteps that we might make? Say I really do love to sip on Reposado usually. Should I be careful about how I introduce that to a drink like this?
I would. So for a couple of reasons. When I think about most of the citrusy tequila cocktails, right? We're going to get into the stirred, the more austere cocktails that lean into old fashioned territory or Manhattan territory. That's a different category. When we think about margarita, Paloma, a cocktail like this, we want to be very intentional about the flavors that we're bringing. And when we talk about tequila being representative of the agave plant, I mean, for viewers, ask yourselves, do you know what cooked agave tastes and smells like? And the answer is probably, if you haven't been down to that part of Mexico, then the answer is probably no. But when we find tequilas that really represent that flavor well, those do very beautiful things in a cocktail because the flavor of cooked agave is a flavor in and of itself. When we talk about reposados, añejos, and frankly, now some other brands of Blanco tequila, we will find other flavors than the agave. With a reposado or an añejo, that barrel might have some vanilla to lend. It might have some confectionery notes to lend. It might have a little bit of, maybe bourbon or rum, depending on what was aged in that barrel before the tequila. And those are flavors that I think kind of, frankly, clash. Like vanilla and lime is not my favorite flavor pairing, and I don't think it holds a candle to agave and lime. That's what I'm always looking for. So like, there's lots of Blancos that have a beautiful vanilla flavor to them. That flavoring is achieved through the use of other flavorings and additives after the tequila is made. I don't think those suit a cocktail like this particularly well.
What's a site that people can use to kind of, follow that thread and learn more about it?
Right, because if what I just said kind of is news to y'all as viewers, you might go, well, wait a second, I didn't know there was anything added to my tequila. And in some cases, there isn't. The problem is your tequila brand will never, ever, ever tell you if they have added things to the tequila. And what are some of those things there? Sugar for sweetness, caramel for color and sweetness, vanilla flavor, you can see butterscotch, basically anything. And while these are tasty, it would be nice to know that they're there. There is a group, the folks at tastetequila.com, who also years ago put together an awesome mobile app called Tequila Matchmaker. Tequila Matchmaker, I access it on my phone a million times a day. They have started a program that they call Verified Additive Free. And you can go on that website or on that app and you can look at a list of tequila brands that they have very thoroughly vetted, and they can say with full confidence that if this brand is on our list, then there are no additives to it whatsoever. The only things in the bottle are agave, water, and yeast. Now, if you're not on that list, it doesn't mean that you do have additives, but there are other sort of things that we can do to tell. I usually say, look, if you're tasting a tequila, particularly if you're tasting a Blanco tequila and it tastes like vanilla, or if the bottle even says tastes like vanilla, there's only one way that flavor gets there, and that's through the use of additives.
Right.
Again, vanilla is tasty in the same way that cookies are tasty. It's just kind of a new thing for tequila. At tastetequila.com and the Tequila Matchmaker app, those brands are a great place to start.
Those are great resources. To answer your question in the chat about can I sub agave nectar for the simple syrup in this drink, 100%. You may end up pulling back off the 3/4, just a hair there as well. Agave and tequila go so well together. There is something about 1-to-1 regular simple syrup in this drink that adds the volume and adds balance to the sour without adding any other flavor. So you'll end up with something that's a little bit different. And you may not, you may have a preference for it. You may have a preference for the original, but it'll stack a little differently in that kind of mint, cucumber, chartreuse, lime, tequila matrix. Well, this drink's great, and I think I could pound it, but while we still have time, maybe we should move from that conversation about agave nectar into this old fashioned, and maybe you can take us through how to make this, and then afterwards we'll talk a little bit about how to make all of these drinks in a larger quantity if you need to. Yeah,
I'd love that. So we're going to bring in the Oaxacan Old Fashioned here. And the Oaxacan Old Fashioned is an interesting drink. It's one that makes me think about a lot of things. It's a drink that makes me think about the flavors of my tequila. It also makes me think about mezcal, because it's a drink that calls for both. We mentioned Phil Ward, the creator of this cocktail. This drink is a fascinating little snapshot in the history of agave spirits for me, particularly because I think he created this drink in, what do you think, 08, 09?
09, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The flavor profile of smoke in agave spirits was very new to America.
Right.
We hadn't really seen mezcal before, right? We'd known
Right.
tequila, kind of the best brands of tequila, by the way, that are here in the market now were not also in the market in 2009, with maybe the exception of El Tesoro, which you had there.
Right.
So now we get into mezcal, which has some smoke and can be really jarring and different. And in fact, just like we didn't have the access to the great tequilas that we do now, the same was really, really true of mezcal in 2009. And there were some mezcales that were maybe problematically smoky. I usually advise folks when you're tasting mezcal and you're exploring mezcal, that smoke can and maybe should be present there. But if you ever try a mezcal that makes you go, oh, that is really, really smoky, I don't think I like mezcal, you probably don't like that mezcal. And that mezcal probably has some flaws in it, probably isn't made as well as it could be. Smoke should be present, but shouldn't be crazy. That said, Phil Ward didn't really have a whole bunch of the really good stuff, certainly at a price that you could work in a home bar or a cocktail bar. So what makes sense? Not 2 ounces of mezcal by any means, but let's use some good agave with 1.5 ounces of tequila, and let's use a 1/2 ounce of mezcal. So that's what we'll do. We'll start there. Let's take, I believe Phil's original recipe called for a reposado, and that's what I'm going to use here because we're in an old-fashioned environment. Yes, we want agave character, but a little bit of good barrel flavor, a little bit of that kind of natural vanilla is going to serve us well here. So I have the Arete Reposado. Arete is a really cool brand that is owned by the people who make it, which is very rare to say these days. You might, if you're in a retail store, you might see their value bottle here with the horse. If you're at a really good bar who loves their well, that you will probably see. Jackson's super familiar with this one. This is their nicer version. And I'm not scared to use nicer spirits in cocktails. I think the better spirit, the better the cocktail. It's all about cost benefit. I think Jackson probably would agree. So we're going to start off with 1.5 ounces of our Reposado tequila, which again, Reposado being an age statement means that it has spent at least 2 months in an oak barrel. The Orendines here have a very special relationship with Brown-Forman, and so all of their barrels are ex-bourbon barrels from Brown-Forman, and this Reposado spends about 8 months aging in those barrels. Now, for my
I'm just, John, I just want to let Stacy know, if you're out of mezcal, just go ahead and use 2 ounces of your tequila and mix along with us, and you're going to be doing just fine.
Absolutely. That's the beautiful thing about the old fashioned, right? It works for any spirit, anytime. It's the original cocktail that we call this a Oaxacan Old Fashioned. That's cool. It's still an old fashioned, right?
Yeah, Stacy's going to be having a Jalisco Old Fashioned.
Sounds great. I'm using Fidencio Classico. This is one of my first loves for mezcal, a really beautiful, I would say entry-level mezcal. That's simply at its price point. It certainly over-delivers. We love Fidencio.
Good stuff. I'm using Vita. I've got.
Sure. All right. So now with any old fashioned, you've got 3 elements, right? You've got spirit, sugar, and bitters. We can go to sugar next. Phil's recipe calls for agave nectar. If you have agave nectar, that's great. I personally am not an agave nectar guy. For me, I don't know how a lot of the agave nectar producers got from agave to the syrup in my bottle, and I'm kind of a stickler for honoring the agriculture in the final spirit. So I tend to stay hands off. What I have here appropriately for the spring is a little bit of syrup made from some local honey. I have really bad allergies and the pollen's about to come out. So I believe, if I get some of that pollen in my system, in my cocktails, it'll help. Half ounce of whatever your sweetener is.
If you're using maple, probably a little less than half an ounce, but
Yeah.
also a flavor that for no terroir driven reason whatsoever goes wonderfully with agave spirits. And then like a demerara, a demerara sugar also has a very natural pairing or something where it's like a little bit more of that high-end caramel, I think. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, you touched on pairing well with agave. That's the thing that drew me to it in the first place as learning how to be a craft cocktail bartender was, gosh, man, these good tequilas, they do all the heavy lifting and they do it so well. You don't have to really work to make them fit seamlessly into a cocktail. So then you have bitters. We're gonna have 2 dashes of the classic Angostura bitters. If you don't have any Ango on your bar, then rectify that really quickly. It's like not having any salt in your kitchen. That said, any old fashioned that I make, I like to go a little bit more bitter. I'm gonna bring in a chocolate bitters for this. I think chocolate and agave obviously go really, really well. There are mole bitters, there are chocolate bitters that do really great things. This is Scrappy's organic bitters. They source their chocolate from Theo, so really love that stuff. I'm going to give another 2 healthy dashes of Scrappy's chocolate into that, and that's all of our ingredients. What do you have there, Jackson?
you inspired me. I just grabbed a little Jerry Thomas decanter bitters.
Fantastic.
Cool.
And now we're ready to add ice and give it a stir. So this is a cocktail that is going to end its life on ice. Probably. That's how I think both Jackson and I are going to enjoy it, which means that we don't need to stir for a crazy long time to get a lot of dilution. We want to keep it a little hot when we have it, because as we enjoy the drink over ice, that ice is going to melt and it's going to dilute and it's going to create an experience that changes from start to finish of the drink, right? Our first sip should kind of wake us up a little bit, and then by the end, everything is mellow and we're just kind of having a nice little party. We're both using bar spoons here, bar spoons and mixing glasses. That's because we're fancy nerds. You can easily build this drink in the glass in which you're going to serve it, and you can give it a little stir with literally anything. You find a butter knife, chopsticks, your finger, like go nuts. You'll get there. It's a very forgiving cocktail. We're not walking a razor's edge where if the dilution is just not quite right, then it falls apart, right? We want to have an orange, get our peeler out. Get a nice fat peel. Obviously, we're going for all of the oil that is contained in the skin of this peel. What we're going to do is simply squeeze it oil side facing the drink right over the top. So we're going to get a nice spray of that orange oil. And then there's still, now all the oil is right on the surface of that peel. That's where all the good stuff is, right? So we're going to use that remaining oil and let that be the first thing that our lips touch. Jackson is put the peel in the drink. I am a discard kind of guy. I don't like really having anything in my drink that's going to touch my teeth. So I like to go at it just like this.
Love that about you. Cheers.
Cheers. Love that drink.
Yeah, you're really exploring, like, even with the strong flavors of the bitters and a strong characterful sweetening agent, you're really exploring some territory across the spectrum of the agave spirit. Stacy's, her Jalisco, turns out, is a split of silver and repo, which I think we both would
Great.
think is fantastic. I think I think people don't think about it all the time, but there's a sustainability element of sort of like taking the recipe and charting a course through what you have that's open, what you have that's, not going to require you to create more things or get more things, So we do like to collect, a range of spirits and certain ingredients, and these cocktails all can be very specific at times, but they have an underlying unity that could allow you to be like, you know what, I'm going to work with this honey till it's gone. I'm going to work with this bottle till it's gone. And you can still enjoy variation and really delightful results from that.
Yeah. Añejo tequila would be really great in this cocktail as well. Don't be shy. Again, if you like the tequila on its own, even if it's a little expensive, throw it in your cocktail, see what happens. In 2 days, it's going to be 2 days, right? Derby Day is on Saturday. I am not a bourbon guy, but man, I love a mint julep. So I will be drinking Arete's most expensive offering, their single barrel Grand Clase Extra Añejo, which is over 3 years old. I'll be drinking that in my mint juleps, and it's going to be delicious.
So I want to do a quick word on voluming up, because we had a great question about, hey, I'm having some people over after this. I want to do 8 of these at a time. Yeah. I think the easier one to tackle is the old fashioned. Maybe you want to tell us how you'd be ready for popovers with that drink?
Yeah, absolutely. So every ingredient in this drink, outside of the sweetener, maybe, if you just had that ingredient out unrefrigerated for any amount of time, it will not spoil, it won't go bad, it won't really significantly change if it's sealed. What that means is that you can put all of those ingredients together into a batch. You can, if this is a drink that you like, and this is true for any drink that you would stir that doesn't have citrus or any other kind of juice or eggs or anything that would otherwise go bad. If it's just spirits and sugar, you can take this this recipe, multiply it by 8, put it in a glass bottle, throw it in your fridge, and you're good to go. If you're looking to really serve it quickly without stirring at all, you can add just a little bit of water. I would say take your total volume of the drink and add between an additional 18 to 25% water, and then just have glasses with ice, pour it, and you're done. That's ready to go. This is a very durable construct, this drink, Now a little more problematic on the sour. Yeah. What might be some steps you'd take to be ready for guests to drop by on a drink like the Silver Monk? Yeah, so we always look at what are the most challenging elements of a cocktail like this? What are the things that are going to take you the most time? In my opinion, what's going to take you the most time, assuming that you have a simple syrup made, assuming that those liquid ingredients are ready to go, it's preparing your solids, your cucumber, your mint. You would want to have a decent amount of cucumber already cut up, maybe in a little dish, in a little bowl, kind of ready to go. If you wanted to, you could batch all of your spirits ahead of time, which, to be honest, I don't know that I necessarily recommend as you get with expensive spirits like chartreuse or some nicer tequilas, because once you've done that, you've committed those spirits to that drink, right? You don't want one of your guests to say, oh, I don't really drink X, and now, okay, well, sure, you got to drink it, and that's not a super huge problem, but you could take your cucumbers and your mint and combine them into your alcoholic batch ahead of time. No problem. Let that sit for anywhere from an hour to overnight, and those flavors are gonna be in your drink, just like cucumbers in the water bottle at the spa. Then have your lime juice ready, have your sweetener ready. And frankly, you could put those two things together ahead of time. And now you just simply take both things, shake them up with some ice. And that's kind of how I would do it.
At that point, an overnight infusion of chartreuse, tequila, cucumber, and mint, meaning a bottle of, lime cordial that was half lime juice, half simple syrup. I'd put my pinch of salt in that, keep it a little bit vibrant overnight. You could probably pretty successfully free pour this drink and be off to the races with something that's that otherwise seems like it would be very laborious to volume up. While we still have a little bit of time on that subject of volume, I'd like you, I know you're a very positive guy and you don't want to say anything negative about anybody else, but there is this divide between these tequilas that are smaller manufacture, made in this traditional way that we love, made by families that own them. And you can't always find that. And there are larger brands. As this category grows, I think people were really conscientious about, the effect of their drinking on the environment of the place that the thing comes from. They could use a little bit of just a little information on what it takes to make those macro brands that the micro brands don't do, and how they can find out which is which and navigate that issue. Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
Oh, I'd love to. So, we see, so I'm really quick to trot out Fortaleza. Fortaleza was, my first real love in the tequila world. It's spectacular and it's wonderful. And if you, dear watcher, like so many people over the last 2 years, decided, I think I'm going to try to get into tequila. I'm going to ask the internet. I'm going to find the corners of the internet where the tequila aficionados or the tequila nerds are. Maybe that's a Facebook group or a Reddit page or something like that, an online forum. And you say, hey, nerds, tell me what tequila I should be drinking. You are going to get a resounding Fortaleza, Fortaleza, Fortaleza. You'll see some El Tesoro, some G4 will show up there. But you're going to come up with a bunch of brands and you're going to say, great, that's awesome. I'm going to head to my local store and I'm going to ask them for it. And that store is going to say, we are out of stock. And some of that is pandemic supply chain issues, but I can speak directly to the case of Fortaleza, saying, no, that is an increased demand for the spirit that they have never seen before. Tequila has never been more popular, and by extension, every single brand, including Fortaleza, is seeing demand that they never have before. If you are a small producer, making tequila that we've mentioned before is additive free, where you only are really talking about agave, water, and yeast, and you want that tequila to taste like tequila, right? Like the agave plant. There's really only one method of doing that. There's a couple of different tools with that method, but the method is you take the agave plant, you cook it, you crush those fibers and mix those fibers with water, and then you ferment and distill that water like a wort for making beer. That's the only way to do it. There's a couple of different tools for cooking. There's a couple of different tools for crushing and fermenting, but that's the way. That method of making tequila is not scalable to the level that basically any tequila brand that you didn't have to go to the internet to find out about is achieving, right? Without making a value statement at all. We look at Casamigos taking over the market, really just a massive, massive brand. We look at a brand like, we look at Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's Terramana going from 0 cases to 300,000 cases almost overnight. The only way to achieve that level of scale mathematically is to bypass that entire natural process of cooking and crushing and fermenting and to use a machine called a diffuser. I don't need to go super into detail on diffuser. We threw a link up in the chat to some very educational resources on what it is and what it does. But I will say that it bypasses that product and just basically using a combination of water, sometimes a chemical process, strips and like just wrings every raw atom of liquid out of an agave to the point where there's really no flavor left. And I mean, you can always fix that by adding things into your tequila later. But this introduces all kinds of problems. You know, we can talk about agricultural sustainability. If you're using a diffuser, you don't need particularly mature agaves to make your tequila. There's all kinds of that. For me, as like just a pure hedonist, diffuser tequilas just don't taste as good. Especially if you aren't adding that much to them. So like, I don't particularly like to see brands feeling like they have to resort to using a diffuser.
Yeah, well, it's exciting to think of our budding connoisseurship can be brought to bear on finding the best examples in the category to champion, because the result is very much a product of the process, and the two are linked in a great way that these resources can go into more detail. And you have given us a wonderful introduction to John. Man, it's been a pleasure having you here, but that is all the time we have for Cocktail Club this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks on May 19th with Vanilla Hong Thong, in a night that could range from the terroir of gin through navigating a more conscientious approach to modern tropical drinks in this world. Make sure you follow us at Globe Events on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for more info about upcoming Boston.com Cocktail Club events. And you can find me on all those platforms by searching for @CannonJax. Thanks very much to you, John. Thanks so much, everybody. And John, you got the vibes back there. You got your mallets? Gonna play us out?
Oh yeah, sure. You know,
ring the doorbells for us. Nice. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers. Great to see you, sir.
Bye-bye.